It's Saturday evening. It's time to talk about the very best comic books in the world with our good friend Drew. How you doing, Drew?
I'm doing all right, Wes. Travel plans got canceled because of the hurricane, but next week we're fulfilling Unholy Nightmare. But for now, let's talk about the best comics of the week.
We've got to start out with the overwhelming badassery of the Lobo Cancellation Special #1. I don't remember DC Comics ever even promoting this book, that it was coming out. Kyle Stark's writing, Kyle Holtz on art. A lot of people talk about how cool Lobo is, and I think you even said that you thought Josh Williamson had an okay voice for Lobo. This is the best voice for Lobo I've ever heard in my life. This might be the best Lobo comic book I've ever read in my life. Now, I haven't read all the Lobo books out there, and I'm sure somebody else nailed the character just as well. But it is so funny. It is so over the top. It's so violent. It's so brutal. It's offensive. It's everything that Lobo should be wrapped into one amazing package. Just the way that the aliens treat him on the planet that you meet him on. The fact that they hate his guts so much that one of them is literally praying for a meteor to come and destroy the planet so they never have to hear him speak again. And that's just the opening stuff. And it gets better and better and better and better as we went along. I could not believe how good this was. This is guaranteed to be in my top 10 comic books of the year. That's how much I like this book.
The other thing I love about this, real quick before I start talking about this book, is I love how the time frame of this is that it takes place between the issue of the Omega Men and the Josh Williamson run. So it's like it could be within the last 40 some odd years whenever the story takes place. I love it. But I didn't want to read this initially. But I was scared because I love Lobo. And as soon as I saw Kyle Stark's name, I said, oh, screw me. This is going to be horribly unfunny and boring. But yeah, this was an absolute blast to read. Is it in my top 5 or 10 of Lobo stories? Absolutely. But as good as the first Lobo miniseries or Lobo Christmas special or Lobo's Back or the paramilitary special, I can't quite say that. But it's easily in the top 5 or 10 of Lobo stories all time. Art-wise, yeah, easily one of the most beautiful, right behind anything Simon Bisley, the Biz, has done for Lobo. Kyle Hotz is just showing off, strutting his stuff with how great his art skills here and how much better they are than pretty much anyone else at the big two right now. Anytime you get Hotz on interiors, he's taken off the leash. It's a win for humanity, in my opinion. And I got to give all the props in the world to Kyle Starks and Kyle Hotz because they have told a fantastic story here with balls. And that's what we've been missing from Lobo, balls. And I got to recommend this to anyone and everyone. This will eventually be in a Lobo compendium of the greatest Lobo stories ever. Do check this out.
Do not read this if you're 5 years old, though. This is for an older skewing audience because there are lots of jokes and so many murders and deaths in there by the time you're done with it. You know, Jim had recommended in the past to read Peacemaker Tries Hard from Kyle Starks, but I was Peacemakered out. I'm going to go check it out now because I think he has the kind of voice that will work for a character like this. And I'm so in love with Lobo facts at this point that I can't get enough of them.
Great, I'm ear to ear right now thinking about it. But yeah, and honestly, I agree with you about Peacemaker. Because I remember when I read that, it really came out when the show was coming out. John Cena, Peacemaker were all over the place. Peacemaker was in a bunch of the DC books. I'm like, no moss. I'm tapped out. I'm sorry. And it came across as just horribly unfunny. But now, since we're kind of past the Peacemaker season 2, I may check out go back and reread it now. Maybe I can tolerate it. But I love this. If anyone's out there and if you've never been able to jump in on Lobo, this is the perfect jumping on point. You want to know who Lobo is at his core. This is it right here.
Easily the most badass comic book of the year. Hands down. Nobody came close to touching something like this. It was so damn cool.
There have been some badass Conan issues. It comes close to Conan. I'll say that. I have to go back and
Conan is an amazing book, an amazing character. He's one of my favorite characters. It's not as badass as this. He never does anything quite as amazing as fucking Lobo does in this book.
I will agree. He doesn't go as extreme as Lobo does in certain points in this book. I will agree with that. Yes. If that's the case, if that's the barometer, then yes, Lobo takes the cake.
Definitely. If you did not pick up the Lobo Cancellation Special, pick it up. They did not advertise it. It's the best book they put out this year, bar none. And I'm loving Green Lantern. This is better than that, in my opinion, just as far as writing and the art and everything, really going together cohesively. Now, obviously, normally at the end, we talk about DC, but Lobo was so good, we had to throw it up front. But we will get into the indie books right now, starting off with Magic Order Volume 5, Number 1, Mark Millar writing, Matteo Bufanghi on art. We had a lot of chaos and death in Volume 4. I wasn't sure what Mark Millar was going to do with the Magic Order here, but he sets up this new, I don't know if he's going to be a main villain, but this dude with the weird pentagram thing on his freaking forehead that's like kidnapping children is absolutely terrifying. Bufanghi absolutely nailed it with that character. And by the end, when you see what's happened to Cordelia, I'm as confused as she is. Really thrilling start for Magic Order once again. Mark Millar has got us in for something that's absolutely out of this world.
I completely agree. This issue for me was straight up creepy. This was very creepy from the opening with the woman becoming a mother and what happens to her kid, as well as what happens to Cordelia in this book. It's all creepy. It's a very, very unsettling. And we've seen some dark moments in the series, but this first issue, oh my God, this was the first time it really felt like a true horror story, what he's setting up here. There were some creepy, scary elements in the past, but like this is it's going to be a wild ride. I guarantee it. And we're thinking this is just the tip of the iceberg here. Yeah, this issue is fantastic. One hell of a cliffhanger at the end of this. Great dialogue, great pacing. Artist did a fantastic job at this. Mark Millar killing it once again. Strong recommend for the Magic Order.
Absolutely. It feels like Mark Millar has got that Miller World magic going on at Dark Horse because we got another book, Nightclub 2, number 2, Mark Millar writing, Juan and Ramirez on art. Nightclub is a really cool concept. You've got some kids. They become vampires. They have powers. They've decided they're going to become luchador superheroes. Unfortunately, there's 2 boys and 1 girl. Both boys are in love with the same girl. And the fact that one of them has gotten rejected has made him do the stupidest thing in the history of the world that you can imagine somebody actually doing, because he's so selfish. He's so heartbroken. He decides he's going to put the entire world in jeopardy. And the final pages of this, you're just like, I knew this dumbass was going to go too far.
At his heart, he's a dumb kid and he makes a stupid mistake. But this issue. So real quick, I love this comic, but I do want to say there's a moment in this with a very young woman where I felt a little icky watching it, looking at the page. I mean, I know she's 18, but holy shit, she looks very young. And it felt like I was seeing something I shouldn't be seeing. But outside of that, yeah, the motivations, the interpersonal drama, the action, the blood, the humor, the romance, it all has a very tragic tone to it. And this issue, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. The cliffhanger at the end of this, yeah, like you said, things are going to be going horrible for the human race. Not bad, horrible. And one lesson to learn from this issue: don't ever trust a hot girl. They're up to no good.
Oh yeah, I think that's what Mark Millar is really trying to hammer home there. But Nightclub has been a lot of fun. Definitely check that one out if you haven't been on the Nightclub bandwagon. Standstill number 2, Lee Lowridge writing and illustrating. This is from Image Comics. It's got a really unique format. Everything is a splash page. I really liked the first issue. I know you had some confusion on whether or not the main character was a good guy or a bad guy. I think that's pretty much set in stone now, that he is absolutely the bad guy, that he's using this technology, he's abusing that technology, and what he does in I believe it's Pakistan was absolutely insane. That was one of the weirdest car chases I've ever seen in my life, as you've got some nerds back home thinking, I've got to go and break into this laboratory and try to recreate this thing to try and stop this guy. And I think it's really good stuff. And I'm really impressed with Lee Lowridge right here.
So, yeah, I will say I enjoyed it more than issue 1. It was a step up. And I do, like you said, I do like how it's very clear here that this guy is a villain. And I do like how we see it from the perspective of these scientists who are pretty much terrified of what this person can do and what they're doing currently with that device. And it's setting up like, yeah, that we're all going to be screwed if this guy is just let off the chain with this device. And it doesn't look too good. But like I said, in India, it's pretty humorous what happens in that scene throughout, and I did enjoy it a little bit more. But yeah, I have come around on this series as of issue 2. It is a much more enjoyable read.
I think it's going to be pretty badass. I can't wait for more of Standstill. One of the real, diamonds in the rough. You never heard of it. You never had any expectations. You're so glad that you read it. So I was happy about that. We've also got Conan the Barbarian, number 15, Jim Zub writing, Doug Braithwaite on art. Normally this would be the number 1 comic book of the week, but DC actually put out a couple of gems. But Conan did not take a step back. It's still absolutely awesome. A continuation of the Frost Giant's daughter here. We get a really awesome one-on-one confrontation between Conan and one of those leftover Scots, I believe. it seems at one point that maybe he's imagined a lot of the things that are happening to him as he tries to chase down the Frost Giant's daughter, and might get into a big tizzy with some Frost Giants themselves. And Doug Braithwaite really, really owns this issue.
He does, and I'm glad you said that about Doug, because I haven't been the biggest fan of his artwork on this book, because initially when you go from Roberto Del Toro to his art, it's kind of a jarring change because they're two completely different styles. But with that being said, Doug's art in this book, the last two issues, has taken a huge leap forward, and like I think this is some of the best work of his career in these last two Conan books. They are beautiful, they're sexy, they're bloody, they're violent, they're wild. I love it. His art is amazing in this book. And yeah, I don't want to spoil too much what happens in this book if they're not too familiar with the Frost Giant's daughter story and from the Robert E. Howard. But yeah, this is a great story. And let's just say the plans may not go according to a certain person's way. That's all I got to say. Yeah, this issue is a lot of fun. Last two issues were a lot of fun. This is just continues to be the series of the year. If you disagree with me, well, you're wrong. Sorry, not sorry.
It's certainly up there. It's in my top 3 for certain, up there with Transformers and Rook Exodus. Conan the Barbarian continues to be an enormous standout out there. You're recommending Universal Monsters Frankenstein #2, Michael Walsh writing and illustrating. I'm kind of off the Universal Monsters bandwagon. I don't know that I've really liked any of the series thus far from Image Comics. Maybe I'll come back eventually, but I know that you've really enjoyed this take on Frankenstein.
Yeah, and Wes, I cannot disagree with you on the Universal Monsters comics. Dracula, the one that James Tiny Onion did, it sucked. He pretty much did a copy-paste job on Dracula. The Creature from the Black Lagoon, boring as hell. You want a cure-all for sleep? There you go, right? For a lack of sleep, there you go. That'll put you right to sleep if you need it. It is dull. This series so far has been fantastic. Talk about giving us the movie Frankenstein by James Whale, but from different perspectives, different points of view, and injecting a character that may or may not have been in there in the first place. And this one was fantastic. Michael Walsh, he's doing a fantastic job in telling the story that we know, but getting it from, like I said, a different point of view. And this issue in particular is an emotional ride, I consider, because we're following Fritz, the assistant. We see what all has been having to put up with and deal with, and it's pretty rough. Serious verbal and emotional abuse. This guy goes through. It's tough at points, but how he deals with it, naturally, he channels it out to this new character added to the story, and it's just sad. And you feel bad for this new character who's getting it from Fritz. The art, the pacing, the dialogue, the colors, it's all top notch. Now, even though it's a story from a film we know, from these different points of view, it makes the story that much more tragic and emotional. This is so much better than the other two from the Universal Monster books line. Yeah, strongest recommends for Universal Monsters Frankenstein. If you're not reading this, fix yourself.
Well, there you go. If you're a big monster fan, that might be the book for you. We do have one final recommendation. This is only coming from Drew, because I did read Feral #6 from Tony Fleeks, Trish Forster on art, and I've liked the series, and I liked Stray Gods before this. But this issue in particular confounded me. I didn't know what it existed for. It's just a weird point of view issue that doesn't really seem to achieve anything. You know, the visuals are still good, but I was really disappointed by this one because it didn't seem to go anywhere.
I will say it's kind of I don't want to say a timeout, you know, or a pause on the main story, but this story is more or less from Patch's point of view. We're seeing life through Patch's point of view from her inception to now what's happened, and we're seeing it tragically play out. You know, it's a pull at the heartstrings, this issue. And yeah, Trish does a lot of the heavy lifting here with her art, trying to convey the emotions in the events of Patch's life. And yeah, there are points in this where I hate to say it, I hate cats, but I got a little choked up at it. I'm like, she did a great job of getting me choked up at it. And there's a great splash page here where it's like all red. You see what's Patch is going through, and because they've been infected, it's rough, and I feel bad for what's going to happen in the next two issues or so. And yeah, this was for me, this was a fun read. I enjoyed it, even though it takes away from the main story. It's a little deviation. We're following Patch. I enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it because I enjoyed Patch the character, and I love Trish's art. She did a fantastic job.
Well, I still believe in Tony Fleeks and Trish Forster. It just felt a little too much like filler for me personally. But
yeah, I can see where you make that argument. I can see that.
Moving on to the big two, we've already talked about one DC book, but we've got two more to talk about, one from DC and one more from Marvel. Starting out with Marvel, maybe a little bit of a surprise. Ultimate Spider-Man 15, Jonathan Hickman writing, Marco Cicchetto on art. And I'm probably playing a little loose with our recommendations on this one because the first half of this book, quite frankly, does blow. It's not very good. MJ schooling J. Jonah Jameson and Uncle Ben on the mechanics of how to operate a newspaper didn't seem very smart to me. But when we finally get to just Green Goblin, Harry Osborn, and Peter Parker Spider-Man and their confrontation with Black Cat, it's actually really good. And actually, it's meaningful and it actually goes somewhere. You just have to get through some bullshit to get there, unfortunately. But when I think they got there, it looked like $1 billion, and it was really kind of cool as you're seeing the Green Goblin maybe slip a little bit. So I'm going to give it a recommend with an acknowledgement that the first 2 parts of the story suck.
I'm glad you said that. Hopefully you kept my laugh in, because it's true. The first half of this book is boring as hell. You may or may not agree with me, Wes, on this, but I think it's pretty clear Hickman is more interested in telling the story of JJJ and Uncle Ben, their newspaper startup, as he is compared to Peter Parker and Spider-Man. I think that's where his interest lies. For me, honestly, I think it was too little too late in the book, because when we get the action with Black Cat and everything, it's only in the last few pages, because even after the JJJ and Uncle Ben stuff, then we get Dr. Octopus and the whole setting up and trying to create a new costume and armor for Peter, and that goes on for several pages. It's like, is something going to happen anytime soon? And unfortunately, it does. But look, Marco Cicchetto's art in this is beautiful. He's doing a great job. But I feel so bad when artists like this are given scripts like this, when they're told, all right, characters are talking here, and we got another page. They're here talking. Another page. They're talking. It's okay, but comparing it to the other Ultimate books, it's good. I'll say that. If this gets a recommend, it's the lowest recommendations. It is what it is. It's all right.
I'll agree with that, and certainly acknowledge that this is as bad as you can get and still get recommended. And on other weeks, it might not get a recommended at all, because there might be too many good books to be even considered.
Yes.
But something happened, and that did feel like sweet relief through the mind-numbing boringness that it has been the entire Ultimate Universe for the most part. The final recommendation, DC Comics, Batman The Long Halloween, The Last Halloween, #1, Jeff Loeb writing, Eduardo Rizzo on art. Big shoes to fill, obviously, with Tim Sale, The Long Halloween legacy here. Eduardo Rizzo rises to the occasion and then some. Jeff Loeb feels like he hasn't missed a beat. This feels like a direct continuation off of Long Halloween, Dark Victory, right into this one, as the holiday killer, at least maybe a copycat, has returned. We've got people going missing, kidnappings. The body count's already picking up in this issue. The Tim Sale vibes were just screaming out of the comic book. I was so happy I got to review this in full exclusively on the Patreon. This is what those guys voted for this week. And I enjoyed it so much. If the Lobo special didn't come out this week, it would have been my highest rated comic book of the week. That's how much I liked it.
Yeah, just like the Lobo book this week, I kind of avoided this too, because I didn't want to read this, because I was afraid I was going to be pissed off reading this because Tim Sale wasn't involved. But imagine my shock. This was really damn good. Like you said, Eduardo Rizzo, he does a fantastic job with the art and perfectly sets the tone of the story. Is it exactly like Tim Sale's art? No, Eduardo has his own style, but he incorporates dashes of Tim Sale in his art in this book, and it's perfect. He nails it, and it works perfectly. There's great stuff here with Jim Gordon, his family, a kidnapping, Batman as well was with Robin, and I loved it. There's a scene in this where Batman says, "This job used to be easier when it was just me." It's hilarious because it's true. I loved it. I actually laughed out loud reading that line. But yeah, I love what they're setting up here with Two-Face as well as Jim Gordon and a certain femme fatale. This is a solid beginning to a sequel. And with the pathetic state of DC Comics and the Batman franchise, this is a perfect palate cleanser and a breath of fresh air. Someone actually gets it. Strong recommend. Batman The Long Halloween, The Last Halloween, #1.
That's right. If you're a Batman fan, you'll be suffering through not only Chip Zdarsky's Batman, which is awful, but now, oh my goodness, it's Tom Taylor's Detective Comics. This is going to be your saving grace, your salvation for the next 12 months. At least we'll have The Last Halloween, and hopefully everyone steps up the plate like Eduardo Rizzo. Do want to say thank you very much to Drew for joining us today. Talk about the best comic books of the week. Had a good time. If you enjoyed this kind of coverage, we do have this, but much bigger exclusive to the Patreon, which also has that a long Halloween review that I've done myself. Jim and I talk about every good, bad, and in-between comic book of the week. The Hot or Not podcast. If you haven't seen it, there's a link in the video description to the Patreon. Hope to see you there very soon.